What's up, nerds? I'm Julie. I'm a herpetologist, and I just got back from spending 5 weeks in New Zealand. And today I want to talk to you about one of my favorite animals on the planet, definitely my favorite animal I encountered in New Zealand, and that's the Tuatara. So the main topic I wanted to cover today when it comes to Tuatara are the fact that they are reptiles, but they are actually not lizards. So when you look at a picture of them, they probably look really similar to lizards. They look a lot like iguanas or other large lizards, but they're not. They're a totally separate group. So today I want to get a little bit into why that is and what are the differences between Tuatara and lizards. So the species name for Tuatara is actually Sphenodon punctatus. Sphenodon was the original name given to the group when it was discovered, and it's been conserved since then. The common name Tuatara comes from the Maori people. So the Maori are the local indigenous group in New Zealand, and the word Tuatara means peaks on the back. So as you can see in this beautiful picture, Tuatara have these like spikes on their back, and that's one way that we can distinguish them from other groups, and that's what the name Tuatara actually means. Tuatara are not lizards, like I said before. They're actually a totally separate group. The group of Tuatara are called Rhynchocephalia, which is a totally separate group from lizards. They are closely related to lizards, though, so they look similar. They share a lot of similarities. So a little bit of a primer on like reptilian taxonomic groupings and classification. So there's the big group of reptiles, and then you kind of have two subgroups of reptilia. So you have something called Archelosauria, and you have a group called Lepidosauria. So Archelosauria are things like turtles, crocodilians, and birds. Fun fact, birds are reptiles. Look back for another video another day on that. So Archelosauria are that group. And then Lepidosauria is squamates, so that's lizards and snakes, and Rhynchocephalia, which is Tuatara. So they form these two separate groups, but within Lepidosauria, Tuatara are most closely related to lizards and snakes. So they're not a lizard, but they're super closely related. They're very recently diverged on that evolutionary tree. So a little bit of the evolutionary background of Tuatara as well before we get into the differences. So Tuatara first show up in the fossil record in the Triassic period, about the middle Triassic. So the Mesozoic era is the time of the dinosaurs. That's when most people are familiar with it as, but it's split into three kind of like sub time periods. So you have Triassic first, then Jurassic, then Cretaceous. Tuatara first show up in our fossil records around the middle of the Triassic, so pretty early on in the Mesozoic. And then they really peak during the Jurassic period, so that middle era. During that time, they were a pretty dominant group of the smaller reptiles. At this point, dinosaurs were doing pretty well, but we don't yet have a lot of the species that most people think of when they think of dinosaurs, things like T-Rex and Velociraptor. Those are all in the Cretaceous. So a lot of these smaller reptiles, like Tuatara, actually started to decline in the Cretaceous period, but a lot of the reptiles did still persist into the next phase of life. After that Cretaceous period and mass extinction, we do have some Tuatara fossils that are as recent as the Paleocene, which is much more recent. But today, in 2026, there is only one living species of Tuatara, Sphenodon punctatus. And the only place you will ever find Tuatara are on the islands of New Zealand. There's been a lot of research on them because they're so unique and there's only one species left. So in general, Tuatara are a pretty big reptile as far as like lizards go. They can get about 80 centimeters from head to tail tip, which is pretty big. So if you have a full-grown adult, if you're a standard size person like me, they're probably about the size of your hand and your forearm, maybe a little bit longer. So the main thing that distinguishes Tuatara from lizards is a lot of anatomical differences. So the big thing is that if you notice, lizards have external ear holes. So if you look at a lizard and you look at their head, you can actually see that there's little membranes on the outside, and that's their ear holes. Most snakes do not have these, and Tuatara also do not have these. They actually have really, really primitive hearing capabilities. They cannot hear particularly well. It is not a particularly evolved sense for them. One of the other main differences are their teeth. So their teeth are really interesting. The skull of a Tuatara is a lot different from other reptiles. So first, their teeth. They actually have 2 rows of teeth on the top. Lizards only have 1. And the coolest part is that their teeth are actually fused directly to their jawbone, which is very weird, as far as lizards go, at least. So lizards don't really do this. Lizards' teeth, like ours, kind of sit in a socket. They're not directly fused. Tuatara teeth are directly fused to the jawbone, which is really interesting. And then coming back to some of those other senses, the main thing that really sticks out about Tuatara is they have a third eye. So Tuatara, there's several different names for it. It's called the parietal eye, the pineal eye, the third eye. Basically, on top of their head, they have this third eye situation. It has a retina, it has a lens, just like other complex eyes that you think of. However, if you look at the top of a Tuatara head, you're not going to like see a third eyeball sticking out of it. You actually can't see this parietal eye except in hatchlings. So it's really hard to see. When they're babies, you can see it because it's not covered by those scales yet. But after about 6 months of age, those scales start to darken and they kind of cover that parietal eye. So what do they use that third eye for? It's mostly for sensing light. Most of the time they're using it for things like detecting seasonal changes, how much light are they getting each day. And there's also some ideas that it might have to do with thermoregulation. So reptiles are ectotherms. They cannot internally manage their body temperature, so they have to use their external environment to help maintain the ideal body temperature. So that parietal eye can help them kind of detect light intensity and what are good places to bask and what are good times of day to do that. So another cool thing about Tuatara is that their diet is super seasonal. They usually eat bugs, frogs, lizards, but during the summertime, they really like to eat bird eggs, bird chicks. So again, that parietal eye helps them detect those seasonal changes and when's a good time to eat things like that. So Tuatara are extremely long-lived reptiles. So people always talk about like turtles can live forever and, you know, sharks can live forever. And there's a bunch of animals that can be over 100 years old. And Tuatara are certainly an example of that most people don't know about. There is one Tuatara that they talked about a lot when I was in New Zealand that I think his name is George. And we know that he was born in the late 1800s, but we do not know when. So the estimate is he's at least like 130 years old, but they don't really have a specific age on him. And he's the oldest one that we know approximately when he was born. Kind of like trees, Tuatara actually have growth rings that we can study to try to age them. It's called like phalangeal rings, so your phalanges are your fingers. These phalangeal rings help them to age for the first like 20 years, like help us determine their age for the first 20 years or so. But after that, the development of those rings slows down. So after age like 20, it's not really a helpful tool for us to figure out age anymore. But we know that they can live a really long time. It also takes them a long time to reach sexual maturity. So reproductive times make it really difficult to maintain like really strong breeding populations because it takes so long. So it takes about 10 to 20 years for them to reach sexual maturity, which means they're able to have eggs and reproduce. However, they can reproduce well into old age. I read a story recently about a Tuatara that was, I think, 110 years old that had babies for the first time with an 80-year-old female. Which is nuts. So they can, once they reach sexual maturity, they can reproduce every couple years, basically until they're over 100 years old. Another cool thing about Tuatara reproduction is that they have something called temperature-dependent sex determination. Other species have this, but basically, depending on the temperature of the eggs, is the ratio of sexes that those eggs will turn out to be, which is pretty crazy. So if the eggs are a little bit warmer, then you're going to get more male hatchlings. If the eggs are a little bit cooler, you're going to get more females. If they're right in the middle, that's the ideal temperature. I think it's 21, 22 degrees Celsius. That's the ideal temperature to get equal sex ratios. So as you can imagine, climate change is projected to have a really big impact on Tuatara for many reasons, but one of those is because as global temperatures continue to rise, they get warmer, we're going to end up having a lot more instances of unequal sex ratios and higher instances of male births than females. The other big threats that I wanted to really quickly touch on for Tuatara, habitat loss, obviously. So Tuatara are really restricted in range. I'll throw a little range map up here. They're only found in New Zealand today, and mostly they're found in offshore islands. They're not really found in like natural habitats much anymore, pretty much just in breeding facilities and wildlife parks and protection places. If you are near the Wellington area in New Zealand, which is the capital, they do have a really, really cool wildlife park called Zealandia, where it's a mostly naturalized population of Tuatara. So they pretty much like created this really nice, really cool like native habitat and released a bunch of animals into it, Tuatara being one example. And after a few years, they actually found Tuatara eggs on the property. So they have established themselves pretty well in that protected area, which is really cool. Habitat loss is a big thing. Predators are also a big problem. So I'll make more videos on New Zealand, especially about like the mammal situation and the introduced mammals that have really wreaked havoc on New Zealand. But the Polynesian rat is a big problem for Tuatara. Tuatara are a really beautiful reptile. I hope we can keep them around a lot longer because there's a lot to learn. I did get a chance to see Tuatara a couple times on my trip. I went to Kiwi Park in Queenstown and got to see them for the first time. Definitely cried a little bit because what a moment for a herpetologist to like see a real Tuatara. And then I went to a wildlife sanctuary near Franz Josef Glacier on the South Island as well. They had some really cool Tuatara as well. So if you're in New Zealand, definitely try to get to one of those spots and see a Tuatara, or at least pick up a little squishy one and support some of the breeding efforts and donate to some of those facilities. So if you want more information about any of that, let me know. And before I go, I do want to very, very quickly just acknowledge the fact that we would not know about these animals and would not be able to research them and know as much about them as we do without permission from the Maori people in New Zealand. So I just want to acknowledge that all of that is on ancestral and contemporary land of the Maori, and we appreciate them for allowing us onto their sacred land in order to study these animals. Last parting thing, I love Tuatara so much that I actually got a tattoo of them before I left. So if you're in Wellington, check out Rose at Buttercat Tattoos. She did a great job. But love my little Tuatara. It's so cute. But thanks for watching. If you have any more questions about Tuatara, drop them down below. I'd love to make more videos about them in the future if that's what you guys want to see. So thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, do all the things, push all the buttons, and I will see you next time.